For more on what an invasion of Ukraine by Russia could mean, let's bring in ABC News contributor and retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Steve, thanks so much for joining us, as always. We've reported here that if Russia were to invade, the U.S. believes that it would begin with cyber and electronic warfare, followed by an effort to move quickly to Kyiv to try to take down the Ukrainian government in a matter of days. In your view, how realistic is that scenario?
If he went into Kiev, which would be very hard and it would be very, very bloody, it would probably come with an attack from the north up by Belarus, where we know all of those Russian military is exercising right now between now and the 20th. So it would probably happen between now and then. But it would be something that would be quite difficult. The weather is terrible. The weather is above freezing and then below freezing at night. It means it's muddy, it's overcast, so all of that air power that Mr. Putin has in place there would have a very difficult time working, just because they can't work underneath the clouds or else they become targets. So there are lots of reasons that it wouldn't happen, but if he wanted to take over the government quickly, he would have to capture the capital city of Kyiv.
And we've talked a lot about the large number of Russian forces surrounding Ukraine, but what limitations do those Russian forces face if they were to try to invade? And how do they compare to Ukraine's capabilities to defend their own country?
Yeah, so we hear this number of 150,000. That's a lot of troops, and that's a scary number. But if you think about what they would be going up against, that's a pretty big number as well. So they're about 225,000 active duty troops in Ukraine, about 1 million all in if you include all their reservists. So the rough rule of thumb in warfare is if you're the attacker, you need about a 3-to-1 advantage. Right now, the Russians aren't even at parity. Here's another analogy, Lindsay. Ukraine is the size of Texas, but it has 10 million more people than Texas. And all of those people in Ukraine are about as well armed as the citizens of Texas. So you think about 150,000 people trying to take over the state of Texas. That's a tall order, and it's not going to be easy. Could Putin eventually do it? Probably, but it would be a terribly, terribly bloody and terrible battle.
And let's talk about how history could be a guide for assessing just what could happen here. Just explain to our viewers what Russia faced in Chechnya and how much that may factor into what Putin would consider doing in Ukraine.
Yeah, back in 1999, there was a mid-level bureaucrat in St. Petersburg who all of a sudden became prime minister and then president within months after leading the FSB, the internal sort of FBI. And that was Mr. Putin. And then quickly thereafter, he found himself in the Second Chechen War. And that was a terribly, terribly bloody war where the Russians actually had to sign a humiliating truce, a peace pact, where the whole Russian military couldn't conquer this tiny little country. So he's had this bloody humiliation in Chechnya. He knows that that is potential times 10 in Ukraine. Chechnya has 1 million people, 40 million people in Ukraine. Chechnya is about 1/20th the size of Ukraine. Mr. Putin knows the risks here. And one other thing to think about here, Lindsay, is the risks are not just to the Russian military. If Mr. Putin gets bogged down and fails in Ukraine in an invasion, his personal power, his future as leader of that country now becomes in doubt, and he is well aware of that.
You know, everything that I think I'm hearing you say, Steve, sounds like the odds may not be necessarily against an invasion, but the odds would be against success for Russia. So if that is the case, then what is this a ruse, basically? Is just the theater of action? So Putin is seeing how far do I have to go in order to get my demands met?
Yeah, if I had to make a binary bet, I would say it's still, I say it's a bluff. If it's not a bluff, I'm not sure that he's willing to go all the way into Kiev and go through that terrible, terrible urban warfare that it would take to conquer the whole city. What he could do, Lindsay, is take the eastern part of Ukraine. So a good part of the eastern part of Ukraine has people who are still sympathetic to Putin, still sympathetic to Russia. And if he pushed in far enough, he would take the Dnieper River, which goes north-south through the country and controls all of the trade going into the Black Sea. And he could take out some of the, accidentally on purpose, take out some of the gas pipelines. So he could control this country just economically by taking just part of eastern Ukraine.
And just lastly, just in the last 30 seconds or so that we have on the diplomacy still taking place, you're a former State Department official. Do you see a diplomatic path out of this that both Putin and Ukraine consider a win?
there has to be a way for Mr. Putin to back down, and that is still not evident. That's what's so scary about this, is that there's no real off-ramp. So the U.S. continues to do what it ought to be doing. The NATO allies are helping the best that they can, probably. We've never seen such unity among the NATO allies, but the real scary part here is it's hard to see that off-ramp that would allow Mr. Putin to save face. Retired
Colonel Steve Ganyard, we thank you so much for your time and insight as always.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.